Today's the 16th, right? Hey, welcome to a live broadcast, which will be taped if you're watching it. You should know this is being recorded in mid-May of 2022, so keep that in mind when we make references to things like COVID and travel and so on. My name is Rudy Maxa. I'm a travel journalist, writer, and magazine article and broadcaster. And with me is James Shillinglaw, my guest today for I Was Just Thinking. It's an irregular webcast of people who are in travel and who have interesting things to say. James travels. It's a cliche, but more than anybody I know, he is an editor-in-chief of a website called Travel Insider Report. It's mainly
Insider Travel Report.
Excuse me, Insider Travel Report, and it's mainly aimed at industry, but I pick up things too. And he travels around the world trying out new hotels and meeting with guys who run cruise ships and airlines and hotels and resorts. James, first of all, welcome to the show. I know what we want to talk about today is sort of this new era of travel. This I hesitate to say post-COVID because unfortunately people are still getting COVID and dying of COVID. But certainly with the removal of the mask requirements with most airlines around the world, with some countries like Japan and Thailand opening up and restrictions about showing vaccine passes in countries like Italy and France being over, we are in a new travel time. We're sort of an in-between time that could change at any moment, as we know. If I was planning travel right now, what things would I do differently than I would have 2.5 years ago?
Well, Rudy, the answer is you do have to see what the requirements are still. There are definitely countries that have dropped a lot of the requirements, sometimes surprisingly so. One of the countries that has not dropped the requirement is actually our own. Unfortunately, the U.S. still has you still have to get a test to get back into the United States, and that's proving to be a barrier that a lot of the industry is uniting against, and they really would like to see that eliminated, just as they were very happy to see the mask mandate eliminated on airlines. I think that's the biggest thing is the U.S. And then there are still a few countries. Obviously, China is one. That's a big holdout. I think you're going to see by the end of this year, if not before, almost every single country in the world, except maybe China, and then obviously some Russia for other reasons, will be open to travel. But you said it correctly at the beginning. It's not like COVID has ended. What has ended is a certain period of time where it was fatal for a lot of people. It still is for some, but the variant that is out there now, apparently, as long as you're vaccinated, as long as you've kept up with that, you're going to be okay. So you still have to be careful. I would still urge everyone to get vaccinated. I would still urge you might have to fill out a health form going in. That's a requirement. And increasingly, you don't have to test, but don't find that out first. And it is confusing.
And it could also change from week to week and country to country. I just want to go back to what you said about the United States still having this requirement that before you return to the United States, within 24 hours before your flight, you have to have a negative COVID test that you can show to the airline, or they won't let you board the flight. But I sort of feel like I'm going to wake up any morning and that restriction will be lifted, don't you?
I hope it will. We thought that would be the case. We thought that would be the case at the beginning of May, and here we are at this point in the middle of May. It still hasn't been lifted, and obviously the U.S. government is on to the next big crisis of some kind. And I think, maybe it's stuck right now, and hopefully by the time maybe some of these folks that see this or in the next month, it will be lifted. We're the last country. Europe doesn't have it. And what it does is it makes people very fearful about traveling because they're going to get stuck. And they may not be sick, but they will have to do a quarantine. That means an additional expense, means unless you had travel insurance, you're probably going to incur, additional nights hotels. Some people, they're happy to stay abroad for a few more days, but not everybody has that kind of flexibility. So I think that's the biggest barrier. Some people are going anyway, but I want to talk about something else that's happened with COVID. Ironically, we are also being plagued by rising prices, rising fuel costs and everything else. rising airfares, rising everything. And you would think that would put a damper on some travel. Everything I hear right now is, ironically, it is not. People want to go. They still want to go. They're going to pay the money. And I think, ironically, it is about the fact there's so pent up demand after COVID. They're going to go regardless. They're going to pay whatever it takes. And so that actually is spurring a real pent up demand. This pent up demand for travel is spurring even more travel to the point where the airlines can't handle it.
Well, let's take it industry by industry, and let's start with the airlines, realizing that the airlines are still sort of short-staffed, and there are fewer flights flying, so that may be one reason our planes are so crowded. But generally speaking, according to TSA reports, the amount of people going through security is almost up to the good old days.
They are. It is. It's true. And the airlines, I don't think the airlines were, I don't know why they weren't, but they were not prepared for this onslaught that people would go back and get it back in the air so soon and would want to go travel all over the world. And so you are seeing, in addition to the, we've had the obvious weather delays, we've had delays because people do get Omicron or COVID. And so flight crews are understaffed. We also have delays because they didn't hire enough people. I mean, right now, most airlines are out there actively hiring pilots and flight attendants to beat the band because
I also get the impression that the shift is for airlines more toward leisure travelers, because the business travelers aren't filling up those business travel cabins up front, which is one reason fares are so high, because in the good old days, it was often how many fare-paying passengers you had in the front of the plane that made that flight profitable or a money loser.
That's
now, while the front of the plane may be full, there are a lot of award people or people getting upgraded, not necessarily all revenue-paying passengers, which is another reason, along with, as you say, demand and fuel costs for fares to be going up for those of us who can't always fly in the front of the plane.
Well, that's exactly what's happening. The business flyers haven't come back, although I have to be honest with you, I'm hearing indications that is going to come back also faster than people thought. Maybe it isn't back yet, but it is going to come back, business flyers. I think you're hearing a lot more conferences happening, and people are flying around to go to those. Within the industry itself, travel industry, we're seeing a lot more conferences, for example. And I think that's happening elsewhere. People want to go out and they want to meet people. I think that's going to spur more business travel a lot more quickly than maybe everybody thinks. But you're right that that subsidy that business flyers provided to the leisure side isn't there right now. And what's not there is frequency of flights. They're also cutting flights because of various things, whether it's a staffing shortage. Pilots, Delta's hiring like 8,000 pilots. I mean, it's crazy. They just don't have enough staff because they downsized, obviously, during the pandemic for 2.5 years. And now, it's a very difficult balancing act to get back up to the correct size you want to be profitable. So yeah, it is. That's one of the issues. So airlines are really chomping at the bit to get back to normal, but they have a ways to go.
All right. So what's the takeaway for the average consumer? I think the first thing is book as far ahead as you can, because fares just keep going up.
Yeah, I would say that. Although, then airlines are crazy. You get those last minute fare sales.
But you can't count them.
Yeah, well, all the airlines are famous for saying, "Oh, we have fares as low as $49," but that's if you want to go to, I don't know, some place that you never heard of before, some city pair. And what's happening too, ironically, as you know, there are actually a few startup airlines in the United States. There are three of them now that are coming into underserved markets. I'm thinking of things like Breeze Airways, Avelo. There's another one I'm blanking on right now, but they're Allegiant, which has been around, but they're kind of the new class of low fare carriers. And so I would encourage people to take a look at what they offer. The challenge is that very often they're not going out of mainstream airports. They're going to secondary cities, and they're linking secondary cities. But I guess that's what the market they saw. So I think I would recommend that people, if they're traveling domestically, at least, that look at that option and see, hey, maybe you can get those. And they're giving some very attractive fares. And of course, to keep up with that, airlines like Southwest and JetBlue are putting in their own fare sales. So it's not out of the question that you can get a fare sale still.
Well said. All right, let's turn to cruising. Ships. Ships are all full. A lot of that is because for 2 years, no one could cruise. And so people who had booked for 2020 and 2021 have been sort of pushed into 2022. But still, I gather, and you tell me because you follow it closer than I do, that people new bookings are strong. Am I correct?
New bookings are strong. You got this kind of perfect storm in a way, in terms for the cruise lines. There's a high demand for cruising. Bookings are strong, and as you said, a lot of people had these future cruise credits that they got during COVID because things were canceled, and they're able to use those now and into 2023. Some of them had to be extended into 2023. What's interesting right now is that you said the ships are at capacity. No, they're not. A lot of cruise lines are only sailing at a certain percentage still because of COVID regulations, believe it or not. Like maybe, Royal Caribbean has been ratcheting it up from 60% to 70 to 80. And eventually later this year, they'll get to full capacity, which, as you know, is not 100%. It's like 104% because they measure everything by double occupancy cabins. And so, people say, well, why, how can they sail at 104% capacity? Well, they're counting that third bed in the room or something. So
right.
That is not at capacity. And so they're struggling with that, but that's a good sign. But the bad sign, of course, is that most major cruise lines took out heavy amounts of debt for the last 2.5 years, and they're going to have to get that back. Most people feel they will over time, but no, cruising is very strong, no question about it. There's been whole categories of cruising introduced. Expedition cruising, which, as you know, because probably saw me spending a month in the Antarctic.
I did, yes, I saw you on social media down. That's a long time to spend in the Antarctic.
Yeah, I know. I know. I came back in between, which was pretty stupid. But let's not talk about that. I did the Drake Passage 4 times, just because I loved it so much. And the Drake, as you know, is the one. It's either going to be the Drake Lake or the Drake, craziness with storms. Only had one of the 4 was bad. That was
only one passage of the 4 was rough.
Yeah, that was. I lucked out. I was pretty good. But anyway, so there's all these new forms of cruising, and of course we go back to river cruising, where you and I hung out a few years back when we explored river cruising in Amsterdam. There's just so much product in the market that I think the cruise industry is going to be very strong. A lot more diversity in product, and it's more challenging. And I'll give a little plug from my readers who are travel advisors. Who, if you really want to figure out the cruise industry, you really need to book through a travel advisor, because they're going to give you a sense of figure out what you're looking for, and also find and deliver that. So cruising is very strong. Tours.
Let me add. Can I add one thing?
Sure.
Not only will a travel advisor be able to help you hone in on a ship that might fit your personality or desires, if they do quite a bit of business with a particular cruise line, they might be able to get you a couple extra perks, whether it's a bottle of champagne in your room or maybe a cabin upgrade. Who knows?
Absolutely.
But you're not going to get that by booking it yourself.
No, and then a lot of people go online. I'll book it online, but there's no way you can get the same kind of deals online that you can if you go to a travel advisor who may have access to a lot more stuff. They are very schooled, and they have been very well schooled over the last 20 years about selling cruises. So that's a huge category that I think is going to be very successful. And obviously, Wall Street thinks it's still going to be successful despite the major debt that the cruise lines took on during COVID, because they're all in, and there are new cruise lines launching all the time. I think I've 5 this year. New cruise ships everywhere. I mean, I've just got back from 3 different inaugurals. So it's like, there's no shortage of product, that's for sure.
Well, they were building them. Well, I mean, they started building before COVID, and they had to keep building, maybe a little more slowly, but they did. My guest is James Shillinglaw. He's one of the founding editors and one of the grand poobahs of, now I'm afraid to say it, Insider Travel Report.
You got it. There you go.
I'm afraid to Travel Insider Report, Insider Travel.
I know, it's a hard name. It's a hard name.
You can subscribe for free, by the way, if you go online, insidertravelreport.com. Okay, so we've covered airlines, we've covered cruise ships, hotels. And before we get into hotels, let me just tell you something I saw in the Wall Street Journal the other day that astounded me. The amount of money that Las Vegas casinos won from people in March of this year was the highest amount of money they've ever won in the history of casinos in Las Vegas. That tells you something about Las Vegas. I don't know they're going to apply that to the entire hotel industry. But I thought that was an astounding number, James. We don't have to spend too much time on it because I just thought it's an interesting stat.
No, and I do think Vegas is back. That's absolutely true.
And
I
hotel
was
rates
there
are up.
during COVID, and it was back. To be honest with
And
you,
hotel rates are up there, I understand, in Vegas. It used to be you could get a cheap hotel room there because
yeah, it's hard. It's hard on the weekends. Forget it. During the midweek, you can probably find something, but Vegas is doing very well, and they're putting in even more entertainment. You talked about gaming, but boy, all the shows are back. All the dining is back. All the activities you can do in Vegas. I'll be out there in a couple months to see what's up because I try to go out there at least a few times a year. It is an amazing place, and it was one of the destinations that really came back strong very early on.
yeah.
And now it's back even more. So you're absolutely right. Does that reflect the whole hotel industry? The answer is it probably does to some extent. In major cities right now, it's tough to get a room. I'm in New York here, and this city's booked out.
Yeah, I was just in New York. Yeah, same thing. I was just going to say a consumer tip for those who are listening who might not know this. If you're thinking of going to Vegas, go to the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Bureau website, where they have a calendar of all the big conventions coming to town. And when you see a big convention like the CES convention in January, don't try to book a room because the room rates are literally double or triple. So look for midweek, not when a big convention's in town. And as far as urban hotels, go during the weekends because business travelers go during the week. If you're going to resorts, try to go in the middle of the week because leisure travelers want to go on the weekend. So go when there aren't crowds. But so generally speaking, hotels, you think, I know they've raised their room rates and they've got a few perks. Sometimes saying, well, it's COVID. We can't put all those things in your room anymore. And we're not going to clean your room every day.
They're coming back. I had almost everything left, and room service is back. Drinks are back.
But cleaning the room every day with many major.
Yeah, you have to ask for that sometimes still, but it's
there if you ask.
It's there if you ask, and in terms of upscale hotels, they still do it.
Yeah.
I think and you're just to go back a second there, I would recommend that any major city, you go to the Convention and Visitors Bureau. They probably have a schedule of events. New York is a good example. Miami, things like that. And yeah, you want to avoid it. You don't want to be down in Miami when they do Art Basel for they this kind of thing. You don't want to be in New York when we have major conventions. But here we are in the spring, and New York. I mean, you can't. It's so hard to get a room, and there. I think you're going to see that across the board. Now, one of the challenges has been that during COVID there was an incredible downsizing of the hotel industry. Hotels had to close. They didn't have staff, and they've been a hard time getting new staff, and they're not up to the staffing levels they were back 2019 yet. I mean, they still have a ways to go. So that's been a challenge. And I know American Hotel and Lodging Association says, we lost all these jobs during COVID, but now we have to get them back. And it's a slow process. And a lot of people, where did they go? Who knows? They just walked away from the industry and they didn't come back. But yeah, that's an issue. One hotel category that's really, really booming, though, I will say, and that's not in this country, but all-inclusives. All-inclusives have just been building all around, mostly in the Caribbean, to Mexico. And this is a category that was booming even during COVID. It was one of the first things to come back. And now it's, you can't, every day, literally, I'm hearing about a new all-inclusive resort being built, being planned. It is just a category. And all the big players are now into it, by the way. You now have the Marriotts and the Hyatts and the Hiltons all opening all-inclusive resorts. They used to never be in the all-inclusive business, and now they are. So you're going to have a lot more product to choose from, and it's like a cruise. It's a very easy vacation to book. You pretty much know your entire cost up front, and you go to packagers, you go to travel advisors, and they'll help you book a vacation, and you'll know the price, and that's it. And a lot of people like that kind of vacation.
Well said. All right, so we've done airplane, the airline industry. We've done cruise ships. That leaves rental cars.
There,
you could get one at less.
Well, here's an interesting story. You may or may not recall, but during COVID, Hertz, which used to be the number one, right? They declared bankruptcy.
Yes, I do remember.
And they had to be rescued, and they were rescued. And so you think it'll be a slow return. Well, guess what happened? We had a real shortage of rental cars. Why? Because they couldn't get the parts for the cars, like especially the microchips. Because every one of these cars now is, you probably have the car. It's like driving a small computer.
And didn't they have to sell a lot of their cars?
Well, no, they didn't have to sell. They didn't really sell them, but the problem was getting new.
They didn't buy any new ones.
They didn't buy new ones. They couldn't buy new ones because they weren't available, and so they couldn't get their fleets up to par, and so they still have that issue. And what has resulted in that is that rental rates are through the roof. In the days of when renting a car for a day was like renting a lawnmower are long gone. We're talking at least, three figures, 100 to 100 plus for a day sometimes.
In big cities like Los Angeles, I mean, you used to be able to get a car for $35, $45, $55. Now you're trying to, it's $95, $120. It's
crazy. What? It's crazy. How can you do that? And the answer is, so I started with the Hertz situation. So Hertz was bankrupt. They just reported their results about a month ago. They had the most profitable quarter in one of their histories. So they're back, and I guess that's good because we want a healthy Hertz and we want a healthy Enterprise and all the other car rental brands. But the answer is that's probably a real tough situation to get a rental car now. You might almost do better in some cases, and Uber rates are up too. But I mean, sometimes you have to look and say, well, do I want my own car, or just do Ubers or Lyfts around? And might be easier and probably a little less expensive, because you're going to buy a rental car. You're going to get a rental car, and it's crazy. I mean, I'm still thinking in terms of 30 something bucks a day, and then I get price shock, sticker shock, and I'm suddenly seeing $100. I say I'm not going to do that. So you're going to have to look at maybe some alternative means of transportation. You don't necessarily, need a car all the time. Maybe some people do think, if you're going to Florida, I'd say yes, but you're going to have to figure it out. I mean, on the other hand, there are some other options in Florida now that are coming online. You can actually take the train in Florida, believe it or not.
And there's the company Turo, Turo, that will link you with individuals who want to rent their cars.
Right.
So I understand that they're sort of figuring out they can jack the prices up too.
Of course.
You might find Turo, but you might find some deals there. Yeah, you're gonna have to shop for everything basically.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back to the days of what happened to the company Rent-A-Wreck years ago. I don't they don't seem to be around anymore. I'm willing to do that right now, to be honest with you.
You're right. That is a name I have not seen.
Yeah, that was back in the 80s and 90s when you and I were both a little younger.
I think I had hair back then. I don't know. But before I let you go, James, let's just talk generally about where should we go right now in the United States and in the world. Just give me 2 or 3 destinations you think are smart destinations for this late spring, early summer travel.
Well, domestically, I think the great outdoors is still popular. It was during COVID. It still is. It may be hard to book some things like national parks.
Well, first of all, you're going to have to book in some national parks.
You're going to have to make sure you book early.
Yeah, it wasn't the case 10 years ago. You have to make a reservation to drive into a national park. You do in some the big popular ones you make.
I think that's an area that really is people should consider. But I have to put a plug in for some of our major cities. I think it's a great time to go visit some of the rest of America, whether you're talking about cities in the Northeast, cities on the West Coast. I think as long as you can figure out an affordable way to do it, and there's some great packagers out there that'll do this for you, that will give you a good hotel deal and maybe a rental car and things like that all together, and an airfare. So I would recommend, go rediscover some of the cities we all lost for 2.5 years, like New York, like San Francisco, like San Diego, things like that. I would recommend that, and maybe some of the other cities that I still want to go to, like Austin and places like that. I mean, that's where I would go. So domestically, it's kind of weird to be suggesting both the great outdoors and cities, but we haven't been able to travel to these places for 2.5 years, so it's time to head back to those places. And I mean, I'm walking around New York. I can't tell you how many travelers and tourists I see, and a lot of them are from abroad, which is crazy. They're racing back here. They're back in force. I mean, I hear more languages spoken in the elevator like I used to. So it's definitely, I think the foreign traveler is back. They were starved to come back. Their pent up demand was to come back to the United States. So I think that's one thing. Going abroad, hey, it's going to be tough. Book early. Everybody wants to get back to Europe. So if you want to go to Europe, book now, and you may already be out of luck. Italy, things like that, wonderful. France they're all really welcoming U.S. tourists like crazy. UK, obviously, Britain, all those great destinations we have, and then some, sort of little more off the beaten path places like Croatia, Hungary. I just got back. It's an incredible country, great wine, great food, and by the way, less expensive like crazy. I mean, the food pricing there is just really low, and the hotels are very reasonable.
I throw the country of Georgia in that category as well, frankly.
I would as well. So more Eastern Europe, Baltics, things like that.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if you want to go to Spain, okay, if you have not been to Madrid and Barcelona, you certainly want to go. But if you have been to Madrid or Barcelona, go to medium-sized towns in some cities in France and Italy and Spain, the big name countries where Americans generally go, in the UK. If you've done the big cities, go somewhere into the countryside or go to smaller towns in those countries, and you'll find better prices.
Or if you want to do it, I would suggest go to your big city, go to Paris for a couple of days, but then go to the smaller city.
Sure, go to Champagne.
Go to Champagne. Go to Montpellier. Montpellier is a beautiful French city in the south of France that's not on the Riviera. It's amazing, and go explore those secondary cities. It's a good time to do that. And then that's Europe. I mean, if we go into other places, look. Our friends in Australia and New Zealand just opened up, and they are dying to get American tourists, and there are deals coming online. So take a look, not online necessarily, but deals. Travel advisors have deals. The hotels, everyone wants you back, and so there might be some opportunities there. It's still a little early for Southeast Asia. They literally came back online very early. And I'd say there are definitely things. The only place that, again, we talked about this, you can't really go is China, which I'm very unhappy about. I'd love to go back. I'd love to go back to Hong Kong. I'd love to go back and visit there. Let's not forget Africa. There are some incredible safari deals and things like that out in the market right now. They're offering some really good deals. South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, places like that. And if it was your dream trip, your bucket list trip, and that is the whole thing. That's the theme of post-COVID. Get those bucket list trips in, because who knows what's going to happen next. So you might as well, get it done.
Well, you mentioned one important thing, and then I'll say goodbye to you, but you mentioned packages. And almost every major, you can go to a travel advisor for that, but also almost every major airline has a vacation arm. It's not owned by the airline, but so you can find Delta Vacations,
sure,
United Vacations. I presume Southwest has them. I haven't looked, actually. Don't quote me on that one. But they have these vacation where they wrap the hotel, airfare, maybe even a rental car into the package. And why do you pay less in a package? Because they can price things without you seeing where the discounts are. So the hotel is willing to give a little discount to the airline, because they don't want people calling and saying, "Hey, you're giving United Vacations $100 a night, and you're charging me $180." So by bundling those elements together, your package is going to be cheaper than buying each of those elements separately, and that's a great way to do a travel.
I would totally agree with that, but I'll add one coda to that, is that go to the travel advisor, because guess who's the biggest seller of those packages?
Really? Travel advisors are? Really? I didn't know that.
Delta Vacations, huge. They have huge conventions of travel advisors who go every year to the Delta Vacations conference. And the same deal for a group called Apple Leisure Group, which has a lot of those airline packagers that they private label them. So basically they have United Vacations. They have all those kind of air vacations, Southwest Vacations. That's all done by Apple Leisure Group, which, by the way, is owned by Hyatt, but we won't go there.
And not related to Apple computers.
Not related. It's called Apple Vacations, and they have an incredible line of all-inclusive resorts. It's a huge one, but every year there's a huge conference of travel advisors that goes down, and they're all the top sellers for pushing vacation packages. So the best thing about going to an advisor, they can say, okay, they can look at the Delta product, they can look at the Southwest product, they can look at whatever they want, and then to give you an assessment of what's the best deal. So I would really vote to still go to travel advisors to get those kind of package products, which you are absolutely correct, are probably the way to go on a lot of these destinations, because they can package up everything: resort, airline, car rental maybe, and that's the way. Pleasant Holidays, that's another one that does that stuff. Classic Vacations, there's just a lot of these people. GoGo, another one, another great packager. So please, and you know who sells the most of that is travel advisors.
Yep. James, I thank you for taking a half an hour out of your day in New York. I appreciate you spending time with us. Let me remind our listeners, James Shillinglaw is the editor-in-chief of Insider Travel Report. You can subscribe at insidertravelreport.com. It's free. Largely aimed at the industry, but you'll pick some stuff up if you know what the industry knows. And let me also remind you, we are doing this live, and it'll be put on YouTube and Facebook in mid-May of 2022. So keep that in mind in light of the advice we're giving you for travel. Meanwhile, if you'd like to subscribe to my travel newsletter, which I now publish irregularly, it used to be every 2 weeks, but I'm doing it irregularly now. It's free too. Just go to maxatours.com/newsletter. maxatours.com/newsletter. Be happy to put you on the list. We don't sell you anything. I'm not going to bombard you with a bunch of stuff. James Shillinglaw, great to see you, at least virtually. Hope to see you soon in person.
Absolutely, Rudy, and thank you very much for having me on. And again, by the time maybe you see this whole inbound requirement for testing for the U.S. will be gone, which, you know, that's going to really be a boost for travel. But again, hope to see you again live and in person.
Thanks. Take care, and goodbye to all of those who are watching.